The Walls by David Myers. It all started one day when I was going home from work. I was in my car 1 minute and the next minute, whoosh. I was hiding in a building. I don't know how I got in the building or where I was, but I knew I had to stay hidden. Somebody was looking for me. I didn't want them to find me. The feeling was overwhelming, anxiety mixed with adrenaline. I was breathing hard too, and my heart rate was jacked, almost as if I had been running from somebody. I heard sirens in the distance, coming closer. I didn't know how I knew, but I knew those sirens were not good. The police were looking for me. This is good, right? I thought. Maybe they can help me. Help me figure out what the hell is going on. The police are looking for you. An unfamiliar voice spoke in my mind. What you mean? I asked that voice. They're looking for you for the murder you just committed. What? How did I commit any murder? Oh, you did. Look at the blood on your hands. I looked at my hands. Oh my God. The voice was right. My hands were covered in blood. Some of it had already dried to a brown, copper, crusty color. It was even underneath hold on, let me get this page right. Underneath my fingernails. What is happening here? I'm not a murderer. I haven't killed an animal in my life. I thought back to the summer of 1992. I was about 14 years old at the time. My family had gone to my grandparents' ranch in the country. My grandpa loved to hunt. He had a lounge room filled with stuffed deer head trophies he had killed. I remember that day like it was yesterday. My dad was standing there with me, and my grandpa was in the lounge with him. My grandpa turned to me. It's about time for you to kill one of these, John. Yep, it's about time. Hell, I killed my first one when I was about your age with my grandpa. Now I'm going to teach you how to kill one. We will get up bright and early tomorrow and go out hunting. I already got the place and the deer feeder set up. I looked at my dad to see if he would say anything. I couldn't kill any deer. The thought of killing one terrified me. My dad didn't say anything to my grandpa. He just turned to me and said, "You ready for that, son?" Before I could answer him, "I know you are," he said, and slapped me on my back. He smiled at me. What could I do? I didn't want my dad or grandpa to know I was scared. I didn't want them to know that I couldn't do it. So I lied. I had my reasons. I lied because I wanted to be a success, not a failure, in pleasing my dad and grandpa. Of course I'm ready, I said. That's my boy, my dad said. Now let's get some sleep. We got to get up pretty early. My dad turned and walked out the lounge. My grandpa and I followed behind him. My grandpa leaned over my shoulder and whispered into my ear before we reached the doorway. His breath smelled mildly of whiskey. He had drunk a cup of whiskey after dinner with my dad. Don't worry about tomorrow, he said. No pressure. If you don't kill one, don't feel upset. We will have fun bonding out there, and that's what it's really all about. I felt a little relieved. Maybe no deer would show up tomorrow. Maybe I wouldn't have to fire a gun at one. I know if I did, my hands would probably tremble and I would miss the shot. Then I would feel stupid. My confidence would be exposed as fake. I tried to push the thought away out of my mind. Don't think negative, I told myself. Think positive. Nothing will happen tomorrow. But even though I tried to stop thinking about it, when I crawled into my bed to go to sleep, the thoughts crept back into my mind. Also images, horrible, vivid images, when I closed my eyes of a dead deer covered in blood. I jerked my eyelids open. I knew then I wouldn't be able to sleep. Not a wink. I finally had just began to drift off when the alarm clock came blasting on next to my bed at 4:30 a.m. It was an early 1990 song by a group called Fine Young Cannibals. The song was called She Drives Me Crazy. Crazy? I was so tired and irritated I felt like I was going crazy. I slammed the snooze button on top of the radio and cut the loud noise off. Please, just five more minutes of sleep. That's all I needed, please. But before I could finish my thought, the bedroom door slammed open. Rise and shine. Early bird gets the worm, my dad said. He was already dressed in his hunting gear. I couldn't believe my eyes and rubbed them to make sure that I wasn't hallucinating. This must be a dream, I thought. I closed my eyes again and tried to fall back asleep. Come on, son. It's time to wake up. We gotta go now. Your grandfather's already ready and outside. We were just waiting on you. I heard him, but I didn't move. Maybe if I played possum, he would just leave me alone, I thought. His hand touched my shoulder and gave me a gentle shake. John, come on, son. I know you're awake and you can hear me. Let's get moving. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to get up and get dressed. I'm going downstairs to grab some quick breakfast. If you're not up by the time I get back, I'm going to be angry. Okay? Do you hear me? He shook me harder when I didn't respond. Do you hear me? He said louder. His breath reeked of coffee. I grunted in acknowledgement. Ugh. Good. Remember, 10 minutes. I'm coming back in 10 minutes. I heard the door close, and after a minute passed, I dragged my legs out of bed before I drifted back to sleep. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and stumbled toward the bathroom and started to get ready. 10 minutes later, my dad came back, and I was almost completely ready. He looked at me and said, Good. You're almost ready. I was afraid that you would fall back asleep. Nah, man. I'm awake, I said, feeling some anger. I was grouchy. And when I didn't have enough sleep, I didn't like talking to anyone. I'm not a morning person, and getting up this early felt horrible. Okay, we're going to be outside by the truck. Grab you some breakfast downstairs if you want. There's some in the kitchen, and meet us outside, my dad said. He left the room again, and I heard his footsteps as he walked downstairs to the front door. I heard him say something to my grandpa, and then heard the front door open and close. I sat back down. I'm sorry. He said something to my grandma, not grandpa, and heard the front door open and close. I sat down on my bed and put my shoes on. My mind went blank for a minute. The bed felt so soft underneath me. I felt myself leaning back on it and my head touching the soft pillow. I laid there for a minute before I realized what was happening. No, No, I gotta get up. I jumped up from the bed before I got too comfortable. Bad idea. Maybe sitting in the chair to put on my shoes would be better. I sat down in the chair next to the bed and put my shoes on. I got up when I was done and walked downstairs. I could smell the sweet smell of breakfast. Juicy bacon and coffee and eggs filled my nostrils. I had a flashback when I was younger, running downstairs in the morning to this smell, ready to watch Saturday morning cartoons as a child. They say that smell is the closest sense to memory, so this memory I focused on. It was a pleasant and fun memory, and it kept me from thinking about the day, about the possibility of murdering an innocent and wandering deer. I approached the kitchen and saw a plate with a mug of steaming coffee next to it. Hold up, I lost my spot here. This must have been my plate they left for me. The bacon I scarfed down first, but that's how it usually is with breakfast, at least to me. I grabbed the spoon next to the plate and slammed down on the scrambled eggs. They were still somewhat warm, so it wasn't that bad. Right when I started to wash down the eggs with a few sips of coffee, I heard the front door open and my dad called my name. John. You ready, son? Grandpa's starting up the truck. Okay, here I come. I walked toward the front door where my dad was standing. He looked me up and down, making sure I was wearing the right gear for the occasion. He had laid out all the hunting clothes next to my bed this morning, so no problems. Looks great. Okay, we ready. We walked out the front door. My dad said goodbye to my grandma sitting in her chair, and he locked the door behind us. The ride to the hunt location was a quiet one. I think we was all still kind of tired and still waking up. We had gone a couple miles south, and my grandpa turned the truck off the main road onto an old dirt road. The road began to get narrow as we traveled with trees and brush on each side of us. We finally came to a couple of bends. First one veered right, then the second left, and I saw in front of the truck an open clearing. We pulled to a stop at the clearing, and my grandpa put the truck in park. He turned the keys off, and the old pickup sputtered for a second and died. You could hear the birds of the early morning starting to tweet and rustle about through the trees. I heard a clunk on the truck hood and saw a walnut. I looked above the truck and saw a squirrel racing off through the upper branches of the tree that shadowed the truck. Well, we're here. The road stops here, and we have about a mile hike through the brush to the deer stand. It's not that far. Make sure you grab all your gear so you don't have to come back, Grandpa said, and opened up the truck door. It squeaked as he opened it, and he climbed out. I grabbed my backpack I had brought, filled with snacks and sodas. I had filled it up the night before. I pushed my grandpa's seat forward, since the old truck was only a 2-door, and climbed out after my grandpa. My dad got out the passenger side and came around to us. Ain't you forgetting something, my grandpa said as he looked at me. I don't think so. You don't think so? What are you going to shoot a deer with? Some of your ding-dongs or something? My dad let out a small laugh. I don't have any guns, I said. Come on now, it was a little joke. I know you don't. Just a little humor. Here. He reached back into the pickup and pulled out a long rifle from the front floorboard of the truck. You're going to be using one of mine today. This here rifle killed 6 bucks already. Here, see how it feels. He handed the rifle out to me, waiting for me to take it. At first I couldn't move. Fear shot up my spine and I was paralyzed. The rifle looked huge, dark and scary. It was so big and heavy looking. I knew I'd drop it. I'd drop it and then it would go off and shoot me in the face. Blood and brains would be splattered everywhere. I would die. I would die out here in this clearing and my dad and grandpa would not be able to save me. Well, don't have all day. Come on, take it, Grandpa said. He was looking at me in the eyes. I could feel a stare. It was a curious stare, a questioning stare, the kind of stares that asked me what was wrong. But it also had a hint of impatience to it. No matter how afraid I felt of the gun, I didn't want to disappoint them. I wanted their approval that I could do this. I could be a tough deer hunter with all the manly glory. I took the gun from his hands. It wasn't as heavy as I had imagined, but it still was not light either. It had a scope on the barrel. Looked like a pretty expensive one from the size of it. I didn't touch the trigger. I was scared to touch it. But I did feel something different. I felt power. The gun made me feel its power. The power to kill and to take life was in my hands. This gun could kill fast and efficient, and I didn't want to hold it. I wanted to throw it into the bushes and run. But the feeling to live up to my father and grandpa's expectation was stronger than that feeling, and I forced myself to hold on to the gun. We grabbed the rest of our gear from the truck and started our hike. The hike was okay at first, but after about an hour walking, we started traveling uphill, and that wasn't fun. I began to sweat, and the backpack I was carrying started to become heavy. We finally made it to the top of the hill, and I saw a deep valley below us. At the bottom of the valley was a deer stand. It looked creepy and quiet in the early morning light. We looked down the hill and approached it. We walked down the hill and approached it. I wasn't happy to see it, but I was happy that the hike was over and I could rest my weary legs. We stopped in front of the deer stand and I dropped my backpack and let out a sigh. Oh, come on now, that wasn't that bad, my grandpa said. It wasn't until we got to that hill, I replied. He smiled and turned and checked out the deer feeder. He opened his bag and pulled out some deer food to put in the feeder. He checked the wind as well to make sure it was flowing away from the deer stand where we was going to be stationed at. Deer have an extremely keen sense of smell. If they smell anything unusual, especially humans, they will not approach the deer stand to feed. When he got done with the food, he walked over to the deer stand and climbed the ladder. The door had a padlock on it, and he reached in his pocket and pulled out a key. He unlocked it and pushed the trapdoor upwards. It squeaked on its rusty hinges and slammed up. He climbed up, followed by my dad. I was about to climb up and I hesitated. I was still scared and afraid. The trapdoor at the top of the ladder looked like the trapdoor to hell. I was claustrophobic. At least I thought I wasn't claustrophobic. At least I thought I wasn't. I never felt panicky in small spaces, but looking at the small hole to climb into made me feel scared. I didn't know why. Eventually, my dad poked his head out the trapdoor, looking down. "You coming, son? We ain't got all day." I forced myself to walk to the ladder and climb up the ladder steps. I reached the top and ducked my head in. It wasn't as bad or as cramped as I thought it would be. It was small, but not bad. It had 3 comfortable chairs and a table. Old peanut snack wrappers were cluttered about in one dark corner. It smelled of old paint and sweat. I finished climbing up the steps of the ladder and stepped onto the floor. It creaked a little as I put my weight on it, and I had a terrible vision. I would go crashing through the floor into the ground below. My grandpa must have seen my panic in my eyes, and he calmed me down. He put a hand on my shoulder. Worried about it not supporting your weight, huh? Don't worry about this here deer stand. Can hold up to 10 or more people and still not break. We'll be fine. Here, come over here and sit down. I'm going to show you something. I sat down in the old dusty chair. It was comfortable but dirty and a little smelly from being outside in this deer stand. My grandpa walked over to 2 slots in the wall. The slots were latched shut. He unlatched the slot, and the early morning air came in. The smell of dew and woods. I can even hear some birds beginning their chirp their morning songs. The slot was narrow and rectangular. My grandpa turned toward me and motioned me over to one. You see out there? He said and pointed out the slot. I could see the deer feeder maybe 15 yards away from the stand, dangling in the wind. Yeah, I see. That's where the deer will come. Maybe today you'll get to kill the first deer. When he said that, the thoughts of killing a deer flooded my mind again. What was I doing here? I asked myself. I couldn't kill anything, much less a deer. I should just tell them. Tell them I couldn't do this and I wanted to go back home. But I couldn't. I would have to see their disappointment in their eyes. And like before, the feeling to please my dad and grandpa was stronger than the fear. I just hoped and prayed inside that I would never have to kill one. I wondered if I was a coward inside. Why are you afraid? My inner voice asked me. It's just a deer. What are you, a pussy? Man up. Only the strong survive, right? The weak get pushed to the side. That's the cycle of life. Get it together and be strong, I told myself. My grandpa stood there with me for a minute, looking at the deer stand. After some time went by, he turned to me and said, "Now the fun part, the waiting," he said, sarcasm in his statement. But you never can tell if it was sarcasm or he was serious. He had that funny ability to fool you at times. So I asked him, "How is that fun? How is that fun?" I was being sarcastic. It's the most boring part of the deer hunt. You have to be quiet, sit still, and wait. It could be an hour or 3 or more hours before a deer might show. And that's a might. We may never see a deer. Then we'll be out here all day for nothing. But I hope we get lucky and one does show. I hope not, I thought to myself. If no deer shows up, I won't have to prove anything and I can go home happy with no blood on my hands. We sat there for about an hour quietly. I moved from time to time, and if I made any kind of noise while I was shifting in my seat, I got a glare of warning. They were really serious about this whole hunting thing. I didn't see the point. What I did see, the waiting was killing me. It was so boring, just sitting in a small deer stand being quiet. Felt like the minutes were dragging by so slow. I can't take this, man. I don't care if they get mad. I'm not going to sit here all day. It would drive me crazy. I wonder if this is how prison is. You just sit in a small cell staring at the walls all day. I made a mental note in that moment. I don't ever want to go to prison. I don't think I could handle it. Especially if it was anything like this. I'd probably have to be taken to a mental hospital after my first day in and put on plenty of medicine. Forget that. I was just about to speak and tell them I didn't want to do this no more when my grandpa made a quiet signal over his lips and pointed out the slot. I looked in the direction he was pointing at and saw it. It was a deer. Not a big one like a buck, but a small one. It had to be a female. No horns. I heard the females don't have any horns. It was timid and looking a little scared. It looked around to sniff the air for any smells of danger. My grandpa made a shh sound. I looked at him. His eyes were glimmering, filled with the desire to kill. I couldn't believe it. Why would you feel the need to kill something innocent that had no warning or awareness that its life was about to end? It would maybe feel right if you could kill something that was aware of what was going to happen and had a chance to fight for its life. But this felt like cowardice. Maybe like a serial killer preying on an innocent, unaware victim that had no knowledge of death coming. That's a coward to me. To kill someone in this manner. This situation has some of the same similarities to it. But I guess if man had a primal urge to murder or prey on an animal, since it's in our DNA to hunt for food, then at least an animal is not a human. I must have been a farmer in my past life, not a hunter, because the thought of murdering this innocent deer in front of me, just for sport, made me sick to my stomach. My grandpa and dad looked at me and signaled for me to grab my rifle. Almost shook my head no, but I couldn't. It was like I was some numb robot, just following orders. I grabbed the rifle in my sweaty palms and picked it up. My dad pointed at the slot where I was going to point the rifle out. I slid the barrel of the rifle through the slot. Maybe I could shoot at it and miss. Scare the deer away. Yes, that's it. I'll scare the deer away, and then I won't have to kill it. I looked through the scope on the rifle, and the deer crept to huge size in my sight. It looked as if it was a few feet from us instead of 20 feet through the sight of the scope. The deer stopped moving. It was almost as if it had a sixth sense. It sensed the rifle aimed at it. I knew I was looking at it. It knew I was looking at it, I thought. I felt my grandpa slowly move behind me. You see it? He asked. His breath smelling like peanut butter crackers he had been eating 20 minutes earlier. Yeah, I see it, I answered him. A bead of sweat dripped down the side of my face. I could feel that fear feeling in my stomach. I knew I wouldn't be able to kill this deer. Even if I tried, I knew I would not be able to go through with it. What was I thinking? I always knew that I wouldn't be able to. Deep down inside my heart, I knew I never had the courage to take a life. Even if it was an animal's life, I know I couldn't do it. Okay, I want you to point the sight on its midsection and gently squeeze the trigger. Don't pull the trigger. Squeeze it. My grandpa whispered in my ear. I almost felt like peeing in my pants. I was terrified. I tried to squeeze the trigger, but my hand, I couldn't control it since it was shaking. I pulled hard on the trigger. Bang! A rifle kicked my shoulder hard, so hard I almost fell backwards. The shot had missed wildly. Thank God, I thought. The deer dashed off, startled by the noise of the gunshot. My grandpa looked at me and glared. Did you listen to anything I told you? I said to squeeze the trigger, not pull hard on it. He grabbed the rifle out of my hands. Now we have to wait, maybe all day before another chance. You should have listened to your grandpa, son. My dad kicked in. I'm sorry, I said. I looked down at the grandpa. I looked down at the ground. My grandpa's angry glare turned into a look of pity. Hey, it's okay. It was your first time, so no big deal, he said, and patted me on the back. I felt a little better inside. Maybe I hadn't ruined everything after all. He was right. It was my first time, and they wouldn't be so mad after all. I know their expectations were high at first, but I could feel now the anger had left. The deer, or any deer for that matter, never came back that day. I was never put in another terrifying situation to kill again. About 8 hours later, when it was beginning to get dark, we made our way back to Grandpa's truck and back home. The trip home was a silent one. I knew then, in my mind, I could never kill anything in my life and never would. That's chapter 1 of The Walls. Tune in if you want to hear some more. Be posting it, probably next week. Finish it off.